This is Glambition Radio, episode number 284, Healing Women Physicians with Dr. Sunny Smith.
Ladies and gentlemen.
Glambition Radio.
Glambition Radio.
Glambition Radio.
Glambition Radio.
Glambition Radio.
Glambition Radio.
Welcome to Glambition Radio. I am your host, Allie Brown. I'm an entrepreneur, mentor, investor, and founder of The Trust, the modern premier network for 7- and 8-figure women leaders. I love thinking big, doing different, and exploring ideas that disrupt the status quo, especially when it comes to women, because we are creating the new models for leadership, business success, making money, and changing the world. And hey, we're doing it with style. So let's go. This episode is a raw one. It's a heartfelt one, and it's an introduction to someone I truly consider one of the most extraordinary human beings I've ever met. Dr. Sunny Smith came into my life when she was introduced to me by Chris Plackey, who I've had on the show, and then Sunny joined The Trust, my network for 7- and 8-figure women entrepreneurs, and then became a private client, and I got to know her really, really closely, and have been just so blown away by the choices she's made in her life to help people, to serve humanity, to serve others, with this interesting balance of this logical, linear mind, right, which comes from her medical approach to things, with this very adventurous kind of freebird spirit, which I just love about her. And I'm going to let her share her story, but man, the variations she's been through in her life into creating what she has created today, which is empowering women physicians, is nothing short of extraordinary. I want to give a quick shout out to 2 fantastic reviews I want to thank you for leaving on Apple Podcasts. The first says, Beyond Brilliant from Rainbow World, USA. I've been in slash mode to save my sanity. I love that slash mode. Picking and choosing where I place my attention and time. Glambition Radio with Allie is the only podcast I listen to now whenever a new episode drops. She never fails to have the most fascinating perspectives and guests that share at real and deep levels. It's never noise. And the next is Go-To Podcast for inspiring and real business conversations from Anna P. Ahimsa, USA. Been listening to this now for a full year, and I've gone back and binged the older episodes as well. I have to say it's one of the only podcasts I never miss and make a point to catch up on. Allie's guests are inspiring and share the real stories behind their success. If you're looking for a show with elevated conversations, not the same old rah-rah hype, but true pieces of wisdom, this show is a don't miss. These make my day because I'm like, oh my gosh, people are listening and they get it. You get it. You get that there is an elevated conversation for women in business, not all this dumbed down stuff, right? And we can still have a little fun and be a little glam when we feel like it. This past weekend, I was not glam. If you want to see a photo I posted on Instagram, visiting my old friend Lori down at her ranch. So I went ranch. I was like country. It was awesome. I'll tell you more about that later. And just one more thing I wanted to make sure you knew about. My members of the Trust were all gathering here in Phoenix for a summer gathering in May, which, can you believe it's May? Hello, May. May is here and summer is upon us and it's hot here, but we swim, we hang outside, we eat outside. It's a fun time of year. So if you've been thinking of joining the Trust, if you are in the 7- and 8-figure ranges, even if you're just curious, go to jointhetrust.org. Complete the brief form, have a chat with my team, see if this is a good fit for you. And if it's not right now, you may still want to reach out. We have some other offerings, some private things going on that you could be a good match for, could be exactly what you've been looking for. So just reach out to us, jointhetrust.org or alliebrown.com if you want more information on the private coaching that I still do behind the scenes with higher level women entrepreneurs. All right, just reach out. We'd love to hear from you. All right. Now, buckle up, really take in this interview. You may have to listen to this more than once because Dr. Sunny Smith is going to take you on a journey that has brought her to being the incredible impact-driven entrepreneur she is today. Dr. Sunny, where are you today?
Allie Brown, I am in San Diego, California today.
Do you miss Puerto Rico? Do you like it back in San Diego? What are you feeling these days?
I do. I love both. I love being there because I love being right on the beach and having 80-degree weather every single day. I mean, people think that San Diego has the most perfect weather, and it does, but we do have May gray and June gloom. So there's something kind of magical and special and fun about knowing you can go outside and have a sunny day.
Tropical paradise.
Yeah,
if you don't want to be bombarded with gorgeous images of Sunny's tropical paradise life, do not follow her on Instagram.
Exactly.
But I think it's just so cool. You've created, I was going through your bio for today and your story, and I'm just like, look at the life that you have created, and your circumstances in many ways like set you in this direction, didn't they?
Yeah. I mean, of course, all of us, it's like our whole life sort of unfolds happening for us if we choose to look at it that way. And so everything that I've done so far, I feel like is the foundation of what's to come next. And so I obviously went to medical school and residency and was a faculty member at a university, at a prestigious, beautiful, amazing medical school for a long time. And that was a beautiful foundation of the work that I find meaningful in the world. Advocating for well-being of humans in general, right? As a family doctor, that's what I did. There is no human that I couldn't care for as a family physician. And the whole goal is to help them be as well as possible. And then I started doing that for my students and trainees because medical system really asks us to set aside our humanity and sacrifice ourselves in the sake of others. And so guiding students and walking alongside other physicians as we did that. And then as we sort of got into our lives all evolve, as yours has, as all humans do and as all women do over time, I got to be in my mid-career and saw my friends and colleagues and just how much longer are we going to do this, right? Like how much longer are we going to sacrifice ourselves forever? And so when you said my circumstances, I had a circumstance where, I had this bike accident and I had to stop. I had to stop because I couldn't keep going physically. I, broke my arms and I couldn't stand up and all these things. And that just allowed this pause for introspection where I couldn't change my circumstances and I had to change the way I was looking at things. And then once I went back to work, I saw things different. The work was the same. The system was the same. The institutions were the same, but the lens with which I was looking at why I used to do what I used to do and how I was doing it and at what cost to my own self, my own family, my own life. I was doing those things. So I started to be much more intentional and purposeful. And it has evolved over the last 4 years or so and is still continuing to evolve, even in that time that I was working with you. And even in these past couple of weeks, it's continuing to evolve to look at what do we want it to look like on purpose. And if we could choose over starting now, knowing everything we know now because we're wiser. Yeah. What do we choose now?
I love that. I'd like to go back, way back, actually, because I have some questions for you, and I always share with my listeners. I love having people I've gotten to know well on the show because I don't, though, usually corner them and try to grill them. When we're together, like it's a conversation, and we're
I never feel grilled,
and it's more about helping my clients. But now I'm like going to interrogate you with the light and. Because there's so much I want to know.
Let's go.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's go back to what was your upbringing like? Why did you want to become a physician? It's it's a lot of work. It's it's not for the faint of heart. I don't know much about your background, your childhood, your family. If we start there.
Yeah, it's interesting that we know each other so well, but then there's all these things, and many women listening can think about their own friends and mentors and colleagues. There's so much and there's so much you don't know. And even with your partner, right, there's so much still unknown to discover and with this curiosity. So I love this question. If you look at my medical school sort of application, why do you want to become a doctor? That's always like the question, your personal statement, they call it. And I spent many years guiding people through their personal statements. And mine included, there was a couple of things. One is that my dad was in the NHL and was a goalie, and he was injured a lot because he was, that was before there were masks. Like, can you imagine?
Did he lose teeth?
Oh, absolutely. 100%. I mean, he won the trophy as being the best goalie when I was born, the Vezina Trophy. And so he had a lot of injuries. And so I would be like his little healer in this hilarious way. Like I would bring him a beer and or whatever little things.
You took care of him.
That's like a little playful thing of what it was like to be a little girl. But I think the biggest influence, honestly, in my life is that my brother is older than me and he was born with spina bifida. So he has paraplegia, currently quadriplegia and bedbound. And you can imagine growing up with someone who repeatedly had to go to the doctor, and the whole family's focus as a child is, what's the doctor going to say? What's the doctor going to say? What's the doctor going to say? And we do all these things, and you'd wait for, is it going to be a surgery? Is it going to be this? Is it going to be that? And it's just, you see so much of how a life and a family dynamic depends on what the doctor says. So
there was
I wanted to heal like that. Yeah.
A power to that in such a wonderful way, right? This person's going to help us.
Yeah. And so, I just thought I felt called to heal and be a person who could help other families navigate that time. Yeah.
So what was your medical school journey in becoming a doctor?
Interesting, because I didn't really know people who were doctors, so I didn't have it all together. I kind of, as you kind of have gotten to know me, I just kind of...
So you just asked your guidance counselor? You're like, how do I become a doctor?
I just bumble through life. Yeah. I mean, I was like many doctors and like many people who are listening to this program, I was always smart. Obviously, I was like genetically blessed with a brain that works and was always...
I bet you're straight A's, guaranteed.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Miss Achiever.
Yeah, top first percentile since kindergarten. And so that, again, it's not to brag or have an ego. It's to acknowledge I was delivered as a child with I didn't earn this brain as a child. I came out functioning well. And then I continued to hone my skills over time. And I didn't really know that much about applying to medical school. But I did. And obviously it worked out. And there's all kinds of interesting stories about, twists of fate and that, like things. It was in 1997 that I got in. And so that was pre-cell phones. And
I miss those days.
I know. And it mattered. Like the trajectory of my life changed because there were no cell phones. I applied all kinds of places. I had been married and gotten divorced. And so my transcripts didn't match.
I didn't know that.
I was Sunny Anderson when I applied. I got married at 18.
What just starry-eyed, wrong guy?
He was my high school sweetheart.
Yeah.
And so we met when I was 15. We got married when I was 18. I went away to college. I graduated from college in 3 years from UC Santa Barbara because I wanted to get back home to him as fast as possible. And then I worked in a biotech company and commuted far in the Bay Area for a while and started applying. And I applied all over the place and didn't get in anywhere at all till the very, very end. And I was in New York Medical College, was the only place I got into, again, at the very end. And so I got a loan, I got a roommate, I had a place to live, and I called UCSD, which is where I ended up going, and said, I have to leave in 2 days. Is there any chance I'm getting into UCSD? Because I'm from California. I'd much rather be in San Diego. And they're like, oh, there's no chance. You're at the very bottom of the list. And I was like, okay, thanks. So
that must have killed you. I mean, you're at the top of the list your whole life, and you were like their last resort.
I know. But I was no UCSD fodder, in terms of, because it's a whole nother ball game when you're trying to get into medical school. So I ended up later on the admissions committee, and we admit like 2 to 3% of the people who try to get in, and so it's a whole different ball game. Anyway, this is very interesting. I had no idea the kinds of things we talk about. So, but what was funny and interesting about that is that their policy at that time was they allowed 5 people in per day, and it was summer. So all the kids are like, in Costa Rica or wherever they are doing their thing. And so they allowed 5 people in. That was Wednesday. They admitted no one called back. You get 24 hours to call back. They allowed another 5 people in the next day. No one called back. And then they called me and they're like, we said you're at the bottom of the wait list, but we've actually just gone through 10 people.
You were in the fast track to the top.
Yeah, exactly. So if no one calls back today, they said to me on Friday, If no one calls back, you're in. And the thing is, once you matriculate in a school, you cannot hold a spot. You can't hold two spots. So, if I started at that other school, then I would have stayed there forever. But it turns out, of course, by Friday at the end of the day, my mom kept calling me and people kept calling and saying like, did they call? Did they call? I'm like, you can't call me right now because I'm going to be busy, right? on the hard wire.
The landline.
On the landline.
Keep it free.
By the end of the day, nobody had called me. So I called the dean's office, the admission office. I'm like, so no one called. So what does this mean? And they're like, I think that means you're in. I'm like, well, could you confirm? Because I have a plane to get on tonight. And so they went out and they came back and they confirmed. And I was like, shut up. I told remembers what I said. I yelled, shut up, shut up. And my whole life changed in that moment forever, because who I am today is a huge reflection of where I happened to get into medical school. Because as you know, I spent my whole career running a free clinic. And that year, 1997, is the year that we happened to start a free clinic at UC San Diego that became the nation's biggest student-run free clinic.
Yeah.
And sort of,
oh my God, I can tell already. I think we're going to need a part 2 for this, because there's so
part 2. I have a lot to say.
You've lived like 7 lives, in the last 20 years, right? Or 30 or whatever it is.
So anyway, it's just that all of us have these moments, right, where we think, I don't know. I mean, you could say universe conspiring in your favor, or you could just say we have many multiple destinies. But whatever it is, there's these moments that really change who we are as human beings. And they're always showing up every day, or at least periodically, if you're looking for them and you're looking for the opportunity to become more and more aligned with who you are and what you want to create in the world. And for you, you're always doing that in your audience, and people are always doing that as well. It's just being open to, pivoting, listening, all of those things, realigning as women. Because I was thinking yesterday, I was talking with some other physician coach colleagues, and there's this like mourning in a way, a bittersweetness when you leave a phase of your life behind. And it's like, I think we don't realize, we think when we become grownups, we're meant to be fixed. Like, it's just, this is who I am now, as opposed to realizing that change is constant. And if you look at your children, you can see them growing every single day. And we too are going through phases, and seasons are constant. And so it's this like allowing ourselves to have seasons in life, in business, in parenting, in relationships, and to not see it as I'm no longer that. This is a beautiful season. Like with my son, when he was an infant, there's this bittersweetness when I give away his crib,
right?
And it's always meant to be that I give away his crib. It doesn't even make sense.
Yeah. Yeah. Even when, times in my life, I know even when I consciously knew that I was kind of making a shift into something better, there's always a feeling of loss, right? Something is being lost, like that time, the value of that time, or something beautiful from that time, or even a hard time sometimes, or even when I moved out of a home into a home that's much nicer. But I remember kind of crying when I would leave that apartment, the crappy apartment.
Yes.
I'm like, why am I tearing up leaving crappy apartment with the roaches? But because I knew something happened there. Like I shifted into the person I am now there. And we're getting deep.
Who we are. I know my husband and I were actually just sitting in the backyard because, as you mentioned, we've been in Puerto Rico for the past year, and we, came to an event in the United States and ended up with COVID and
which shall not be named.
And are isolating in San Diego.
Not mine.
I came here because my dad has a medical appointment, and we can't leave the house now. And so we're talking about the house. We're in the house and we're having that conversation. It's like, this is where we brought our son. This is where he learned to walk. This is where he went to kindergarten. And we're having the reflection, about the symbolism of that. And I just think being present for all of these transitions in our lives more purposefully, because I think a lot of us get to it's a very linear journey, go to college, whether you're going to become a professional or an entrepreneur, all these things. It's like step, 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 step. And then you get to be like 30s, 40s, and you're like, wait, what's the next step? It's not retirement, is it? Like there isn't like a script for 40 to 60 for women, or for anyone.
Yeah. There's no linear trajectory from 40 to 60.
Right. What is it that happens there? It's like this big gap where we're like, what is happening? What is life all about? What do we do? So I think there's just a lot of reflection and reinvention and power, honestly, to knowing who you are knowing where you've been and knowing that there's unlimited possibilities as soon as you take off your blinders.
So take us to when you were at the end of medical school, you were going into your residency. Take us back to that time. I watched a video clip of you waking from a coma. Which was, it was fun. You sent that to me and you said, warning, this is a tearjerker. And so I didn't kind of watch it for a while because it wasn't the right time. And then one day it wasn't the right time, but I'm like, well, I need to finally watch this. I'm sure I'll be fine. Then I'm like,
Yeah, it's a tearjerker.
It was intense. Tell us what happened during that time. That was before the bike accident, right? That was, that was long before. Okay. Cause I'm getting a little confused on the Sunny Smith timeline.
Yes. Okay. So 1997, as I said, was that story when I got in to medical school. And then 2001, I became an intern. So for those who don't know, you spend 4 years in medical school and then you spend at least 3 years in residency. And that first year, they call you an intern. And so when I did it, there were no work hour restrictions at all, which meant they could work you as much as they wanted, which often was around 100 hours. Now there has been legislation where it should be, or there are rules that people follow where it should be no more than 80 hours, because of course we all want our brain surgeons and emergency surgeons working on us after 80 hours.
And you're to be clear to everyone listening, we're not talking about an 80-hour work week. You're talking about 80 hours in a row.
Well, that 80 hours is the work week on average is what they say, though. So I would say when I did it, and then there's where we are now, which is only a little bit different, but we would traditionally take like 36 hours in a row, and they call it like Q, which is every like Q4 nights or something like that. So you work, say, 12 hours every single day, and every fourth day you're on for 36 hours straight.
Wow. Okay.
And so now what they do, though, is at the end of 24 hours, you're supposed to stop taking new patient care. And so you can just like wrap up the other things that you're doing. Anyway, the details don't really necessarily matter to the audience, except to say that there are no other industries that I'm aware of. Like you wouldn't do it with pilots. You wouldn't do it with people who drove trucks. You wouldn't, anybody who interacts with the public in a safety fashion, it would not make any sense to have.
Isn't that interesting?
Someone, it's not like it's optional. It's completely required. There is no way to become a doctor, even today, without going through a training program that requires you to stay up 24 hours in a row, which is completely inhuman and doesn't even make any physiologic sense at all. And you don't want me taking care of your child at 3 a.m. after I've been up for 20 hours. But anyway, that's aside the point. So like my life story becomes I become an easy spokesperson for this unintentionally again. So people, if they're interested, can literally, there was a television show. I matched into residency at Santa Monica UCLA Hospital. And so UCLA had no intention of being on a television show, but when you show up to work in LA, there's like your patients are in the Screen Actors Guild and there's just cameras everywhere and there's documentaries everywhere. And there were Academy Award winning documentarians who were following me all day, every day as part of my internship. And they're very kind people who do meaningful work in the world. And I happen to be being filmed by them. So anyway, that's how there's footage. So back then it was called The Residents, was a TV show. And it showed on Discovery Health and the Learning Channel and stuff like that. But if people want to see the type of footage that you're talking about right now, clips of it are available on Amazon streaming. I think you have to pay for it. But it's the clips are in a movie called Do No Harm. And that movie, Do No Harm, is a documentary that is about physician distress and physician suicide and how we treat physicians as not human beings. So anyway, I showed up as a very healthy, enthusiastic, idealistic young physician. And, you could see me in there like giving money to homeless people and, doing all the things. I'm like, it's just so me. I've always been me. Right. And so I'm doing all those things. And I start saying, I'm having symptoms. I can't speak. Like I was at Cedars-Sinai and I was taking the staples out of a patient who had a C-section. And I suddenly couldn't speak. I was like, she got out of her bed, put me in her bed, called the nurse. I went down for an MRI and all kinds of testing and lumbar punctures and blah, blah. And they couldn't find out why these kind of recurrent symptoms kept coming. The neurologist, of course, there's footage. And he says, I think there's an idea that there's like a hysterical woman underneath a lot of complaints, hysteria is the wandering uterus or whatever.
Right.
And any neurologic complaint that you can't figure out, like, who knows if it's just quote unquote stress induced. So anyway, he's like, it could just be focal migraines. And I was like, okay. And I was like, I'm worried because I was $100,000 in debt and I wanted to be a doctor. I'd worked my whole life to be a doctor. And I was like, I'm worried I'm not going to be able to be a doctor because I keep going to work and these weird things keep happening to me. And he was like, I wouldn't worry. And I'm like, I worry. And the next scene, they cut to me intubated in a coma.
Good editing.
And so what was happening the whole time, exactly. What was happening the whole time is that I was having partial seizures from sleep deprivation, but I wouldn't lose consciousness because it was only a part of my brain that was starting to seize.
Oh my gosh.
And so over the course of time, what ended up happening is in February 2022, I was with my grandparents at the Man Chinese Theater. So symbolic and interesting. They had come to visit for a long weekend and I had just gotten out of the car. I was driving with my elderly grandparents and I would put my hands down where, the stars put their hands in their feet and my hands started shaking. And my grandparents were like, what's going on? And I was like, oh, don't worry. I've been having these symptoms. And then I just fell over.
Oh.
And I was comatose for a week. They didn't know if I would ever wake up. They didn't know why I wouldn't wake up. My seizure is called status epilepticus. It went on for like 12 hours. Which causes brain damage, anoxic brain damage, and you don't know if anyone will ever get better. So the hope was that I would live and that if I lived, that I would be okay and I would be neurologically intact. And if so, that I would be the same Sunny.
Right.
And then would I ever practice medicine? That was most people thought the answer was no, because my neurointensive care doctor at that time said, the multitasking that is required in this type of work and many, many types of work, but certainly in this type of work is a very sophisticated function of the cells in the brain. And it's just unlikely you'll ever be able to do that. And of course, the end of the story is that, I became a full professor that was very awarded across the country at the prestigious medical school that I went to. And I went on to mentor thousands of students and write tons of letters and do all of these things. So it all worked out okay, but it could have gone a very different way. And so I at that time just wanted to get through it. I just wanted to get on the meds. Fine. Put me on seizure meds. I'll keep taking your call. I'll do all the things. I'll jump all the hoops. Just let me get out. And then after decades, I'm like, as the more and more distant you get with it, you're like, why do we do this to people? Tell me again why. And then every year as a formal advisor and faculty member, I would welcome and say the names. There's, we had about 125 to 134 new students per year that worked their whole life. They're so sweet. They're so innocent. They're so smart. They're so idealistic. They want to change the world. And we had this white coat ceremony and I would read their names and I would meet their parents and I would give them their white coat and do the Hippocratic Oath with them. And then within days, weeks, months, they were sobbing and miserable. I'm like, why do we do this? Why is it this way? And so eventually, and then when I lost a student, pause for my tears.
It's okay.
I just decided I can't do this anymore.
Yeah. Suicide?
So I just didn't want to be complicit or a part of a system where this was the expectation. It's not. All of us are complicit in the societies that we live in and participating. And so I just wanted to speak up more and say, it doesn't have to be this way. It doesn't have to be this way. There's nothing that is inherently good about making people do the things they make us do. And so I think it's time. This is a system that's over 100 years old at a minimum when they started residencies like this. And back then it was all old white men and they didn't have children. And they lived in the hospital and there was no MRIs and there was no electronic health records. And people weren't as sick as they are now. People would live there for a long time in the hospital. So anyway, big rant about the whole medical system, but it's just that this is even before the pandemic. It's time for change, people. Like, why are we still doing the things the way we used to do them 100 years ago when nothing in medicine or society looks like it did back then? And then the pandemic came and now it's like, this is the opportunity for physicians to really say, it can't stay like this anymore.
Yeah.
It just can't. You're killing us. We're leaving in droves. We can't do it like this anymore. So anyway, that's my story.
Wow. And so was there, when was the moment that you knew, you know what, I think my voice is going to be used for this. I'm going to create something to help these women and men. You know, was there a defining moment, or did this happen gradually as you were looking to maybe do something different? You know, I'm not sure if I know the bridge of how empowering women physicians was created.
That's a great question. I mean, you know, when we look back, I think all of us can see we always were who we are now. We're just being more of who we always were. And so, you know, if I look back, I mean, obviously I was in that documentary 20 years ago talking about physician wellness. There's a documentary from the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention about physician distress that's, I don't know, 10, 15 years old. So I was speaking out about these things in academic settings. That documentary aired on PBS. You know, I would speak and present on these things, and it was my role and my actual job title to talk about student wellness. And so wellness is the personal and professional development of the human being going through the training system was my actual responsibility. And I was paid for that through the university. And then, you know, when I found I was already doing psychiatry and therapy myself as a patient. And then when I found coaching as a tool that I had not used or been aware of, it was like a big secret that I wanted to do it and learn more about it because I thought everyone thought I was insane. And there weren't a lot of physicians doing it at that time. So I learned the tools. I applied them to my life. I decided I wanted to help some other women physicians do the same thing. And I just started in my office, you know, with a podcast. I was like, listen, I just said, you know, this is not endorsed by my university. This is not edited by the Discovery Channel or the Learning Channel. This is, you know, as I said, I've spoken through many other people's platforms before. And I'm like, this is me. This is my platform. This is my voice. All we need literally is our laptop and a microphone. And I just started speaking. And again, I used to speak inside of universities and lecture halls and national conferences, but there's something interesting and different and freeing and almost exponential or logarithmic about the reach you can have when you're on everyone's cell phone. Literally everyone on the planet can listen to me right now if they want to, right? I mean, you know this work, Allie, of course, but it's just, it's a very fascinating time in history for women, for humans, for reach, I mean, there's more power in my cell phone than put the man on the moon. And so if any of us, if anyone here listening has any mission, we can do the traditional routes. And sometimes what I have found, because I don't want to interrupt myself, but sometimes what I've found is you can lead more from the outside. Because I was leading and I had just gotten the most prestigious appointments and promotions and was a part of a team that fortunately was able to go visit the Dalai Lama in India and ask for his advising on compassion and physician wellness. And I asked him myself, you know, physicians are suffering. And physicians are human, right? And we are suffering. And he is a representation of how to decrease human suffering. Help me, help people. And that was through a university position. What do I do? And I was learning that when I do things, I've been able to create so much change and impact and within universities. And what I learned during that time is I don't need anyone's permission or platform to create the change I want to create in the world. And that's when I started doing it more from the outside. And again, because you don't need permission, you don't need timelines. You could say anything you want, whenever you want, bring on any guest you want, as you do, right? It's freedom to do things on your terms. And I think that this is a really fascinating time in society where it's just instead of the hierarchical way that we all used to receive information, like it's open to everyone now.
Yeah.
So we all get to speak our truth and no one gets to filter us.
Yeah.
They just don't.
Was that even hard for you? Because you came from such a linear path, right? And you've always been like, you're the one who checks the boxes, gets the A's, you know, whether it's conscious or unconscious, you know, you naturally had an achieving mind, right? But then were you like, was it almost strange? You're like, I can say anything I want and I can make this as long as I want, as short as I want. I can sleep when I want. I can eat when I want. Like, was it just like
what is this?
Just like when people come out of corporate or start a business, they're like at their desk at 7:30 and they're like, oh my gosh, maybe I should like take a walk or get a dog.
It's very discombobulating to be like, what do you mean there are no rules? Yes. And it's fascinating because
that's your book title.
Yeah. What do you mean there are no rules?
I'm looking for the rules sheet.
Exactly. Once you step outside of it, you realize all the rules were made up all along. They're all human made and we all just agree to them for some reason. And so, yeah, it can be a little bit discombobulating, of course, because I really literally thought that I would be at my university in my corner office in my prestigious role until 65. I really did. And then as I started seeing, it's just interesting. I think even the pandemic, as you know, has been very revealing with this because we all just had these defaults. We thought we had to get up at 6 and get our kids ready for school and, make the breakfast and the lunch and get in our car and drive across town and go do things in person. And that's the only way to make an impact in the world and all of these. And so it's like, once all of that goes away, like, wow, there's just so much, it reveals the mental constructs we didn't even realize we had and we didn't realize we were choosing. And so I choose not to participate in all of those mental constructs that I used to. And now I'm doing it again and again and again. And even right now, you think that when you get to this, I'm going to mention briefly this like arrival fallacy. Like you think when you're in med school, when you become a resident, you'll be happy because you're finally out of med school. When you are a resident, you think when you're an attending, you're going to be happy because you finally live a life on your own terms, you think. And then you get there and you're like, whoa, this is not on my terms at all. Every 15 minutes seeing someone and having 100 charts at the end of the day. This is not what I strived for all this time at all. And then I became an entrepreneur. As I said, I'm driven by mission, meaning purpose, impact, mental health, decreasing human suffering, all of that. So I've been doing that all along in different clothing, in different ways, in different roles. And so then when I entered the entrepreneur world, as you know, Allie, people are like, well, you find your clients, you make your impact, you create a 7-figure business, you create a multi-million-dollar impact with multi-million-dollar business with impact all over the world. And then you're like, and then I'll be happy because then I will know that I have achieved what I wanted to achieve. And then you get there and you're like, So it's always being willing to reinvent. And then as I've been telling my friends how we talked about recently at Iconic about praying to a false god. And that it's not really about God at all, as you know, Allie, but it's like that top line revenue that people talk about. That is a false god. Oh
yeah. We talked about who are your false gods, right? Like these metrics that.
Yes.
And so
you
important.
think it's a linear path. And you have these KPIs in business and you're like, okay, here's the linear path, follow the path. And then once you meet that path, you will be happy. And I think realizing that all of these things are a false god. In fact, last night, someone sent me this YouTube video of Jim Carrey that said, and people can Google it if they want to, but they introduced him as 2-time Golden Globe winner, Jim Carrey. And he said, I am not just a man, I am 2-time Golden Globe winner, Jim Carrey. And at night, I don't just dream regular dreams. I dream of becoming 3-time Golden Globe winning Jim Carrey, because then I will be happy. And the elusive goal, I will finally be worthy and whole. Yeah. And everyone laughs. And he's like, as if any of this matters, but let's go ahead and give you the awards.
Right.
And so I think it's this recalibration always of what matters. What is your personal North Star? Don't let anybody else tell you what matters. And that has been one of the biggest learnings of this past several months where I am right now is don't let anybody else tell you. This is the path. This is the way. This is the metric. Here's the hoop. Here is the, I used to be a high jumper, like terrible high jumper, but
wow.
Here's a bar and someone shows you a bar. You're like, how high? Okay, I'm going to jump over that. I'm going to jump way over that. And it's like, who put that bar there? Why is that where you're jumping? Like,
and why am I going this direction?
Exactly. So if you're, I'm reflecting these days more and more so. And again, it's always an evolution and just an onion peel and a deeper layer. But, living as if your time is short, because it is. And if it was, because this is a conversation that hospice people have with people all the time. If your time was shorter than you would like to think, how would you like to spend it? What would you like to be doing? And then the question becomes, why are you not doing that now? So anyway, and I feel like my life purpose right now is helping not only myself do that, my family, my close family do that, and other women physicians to do that. Because listen, ladies, they've achieved all the things. They've done all the things.
Can you share with everyone the conversations that happen in your rooms and your groups that people may be just really surprised at? That, I know there's these women just have nowhere else to share these things and go through these things. Could you give us a little snapshot of what happens in EWP?
Yeah, it's really become incredibly meaningful. As I said, I started doing it just one-on-one, right, with clients. And then what I found was incredibly powerful was doing it together. I mean, we do one-on-one and group, but when you're talking with a coach or say a therapist or psychiatrist, you sort of think you're uniquely broken, right? I have this problem, please help me. And when you do it in community, I modeled what I do after my career as a medical educator. We do one-on-one, small group, and large group, because that's how we make doctors, right? And so if it's good enough to teach you all that you need to know in that, I thought, well, let's come together in the same way. And so in these small groups, people can see themselves in each other, and they feel like they're a bad mom, a bad doctor, a bad, whatever it is. And when you see someone else say those things like, I'm 50 charts behind, I can't ever keep up, I'm doing my best, and just cry, you just hold so much space for her. And when it's you're like, I suck, this is terrible, why can't I do it right? And if you imagine anyone in the group saying that to someone else in there, you suck, why can't you do this right? You should just go faster. Like, that is the meanest way. It's like an internet troll, right? It's like our brains are an internet troll talking to us at all times. And so when you come into a group of other women physicians, all walks of life, all across the US and Canada mostly, but we have people in Thailand and Europe, and you find this common humanity and this common, what we actually reveal is not only the common humanity, but the common indoctrination that we didn't realize, the internalized beliefs that we have that were fed to us, that we start to say, oh, we make perfect sense why we live the way we do, why we tolerate what we do, why all of the things. And we get outraged for each other because on average, women physicians are making about 75% of what male physicians make in the same exact role with the same exact productivity. So we're working 3 months a year for free. And that is pretty outrageous. So I think the thing is people don't realize, because you see your colleague down the hall, right? You refer to cardiology, you refer to gynecology, you do all these things, and everyone looks like they've got it together. They got their white coat, the type, they drive in their nice car, whatever. But nobody says what's really going on behind the scenes. And so it's a space where we talk about what's really going on. People often will talk about you have to create a business around one problem and solve that one problem. And I mean, people come to me with everything. And what we see is that we're all examples of what is possible and what it means to be a woman physician, what it means to be a woman, what it means to be a human. And there's no right or wrong way. And I find it interesting, even when people listen to my podcast who aren't physicians, there is this idea that physicians have it all together and that we make all this money and that we've achieved our dreams. And, how could we possibly be distressed? How could we possibly be human? They really don't know, because there is this distance when you go see your doctor. You're like, hello, I'm having problems with my vagina, and you're not thinking that your doctor's like distressed and wanting to quit.
Yeah.
Right. And they are. And so I think for some people, they've been even interested in listening to my podcast to hear that physicians really are people too, just like them. And then when you come in my paid program, there's just so much caring, supportiveness, compassion, meeting ourselves right where we are no matter what. And here's the thing is I believe, that's how I became a national or international leader. That's how I became a multi-million-dollar CEO. It's like you meeting yourself right where you are is the key to becoming the leader that you want to be, whether it's in your university, whether it's in your business, whether it's anywhere. It's not a soft skill. It's like the skill that allows you to meet yourself continually right where you are and then go, okay, now what?
Yeah.
And now what? And now what? Because if you know that you'll always have your own back, no matter how bad you fail, you're willing to do anything, right? You're willing to fail publicly. You're willing to let people talk about you. So anyway, there's a lot that goes on in there. We first started with just life coaching, which quote unquote just, I mean, that's basically everything. But, physician coaching for all things that happen in physicians' personal and professional lives. And then eventually, because I became a very successful entrepreneur, people started also asking me if I would teach them how I do what I do and show them how I run behind my business, the behind the scenes. And of course, I'm all for every woman physician owning her power, owning her expertise, speaking up, speaking her voice. Nothing bad happens when women physicians are leading and using their expertise. So I am happy to share everything I know with them. So I do. That is not the thing that I focus on in my program. My focus is to enjoy this life you worked so hard to create.
How many of them end up leaving the profession? Do you, I mean, you probably have a push-pull, like you want to support them in that role, but then is part of you like, quit, come start your own business.
No, we need healers. Who's going to take care of me? And who's going to take care of all of us? All of us. Here's the thing. Everyone on the planet needs a doctor. Everyone. Like throughout space and time and history and society, physicians are the most valuable instrument in healthcare, the most valuable asset in healthcare. I know that seems elitist and I don't mean it to be that way because we absolutely need our entire team. We need physician assistants and nurses and MAs and all of the things. But the thing is, without the physician, the team cannot function, right? Like you can't go to the OR without the surgeon. And so we need to create work environments that treat the physicians as if, like my dad also, he likes racehorses. And so imagine if you treated the physician like you treat the $1 million racehorse. It's like, that's the asset. How would you protect that asset? Like when we fly our horse or when we drive the horse, you make sure it gets there in time. You make sure it has plenty of time to sleep. You make sure it has plenty of time to do the exercise it needs. Like that's, if you say you're Angelina Jolie, I don't know if it's you insure your legs or whatever the thing is, but if you're a healthcare system or if you're a society or if you're the Surgeon General, the physicians are a huge asset. To let's help protect them. Let's ask what they need. Let's ask how we can keep you, because it takes a long time to get to be able to form this.
Do you feel you've actually influenced changes in the industry from your work and help these women speak up for what they need?
Yeah, I think all of us do. That is my belief. I'm known for various things, but certainly belief is one of them. And, like I put on my little bracelet, she believes, so she could, so she did, whenever I'm about to go do something that people think I can't do. And you have to believe that you don't have to, you have the opportunity to. So why would you not? That every woman physician I'm coaching changes the world around her. Every one of them. They change their institution. They change the way their MAs see things, the way their boss sees things, the way you can't unknow these things once you know it, that it doesn't have to be this way. And we are the ones who are going to advocate for change, because we can wait for the system to change, but we're going to be waiting an awful long time. So I think it's up to us to speak our voices. And so I have a lot of clients who are in leadership. We just had a wrap-up call this weekend, and one is vice dean and was just promoted to vice dean during my program. And, there's just leaders of all different sorts. So do people stay and do people go? The answer is yes and yes. And what is interesting is oftentimes people come in because people join programs, obviously, when they have some significant pain, right? Like something is really bothering them.
Something triggered.
So they're like, help me, dude, help me. And so they sign up, and sometimes they're like, I'm convinced, I'm leaving, I'm out, I can't take it. And this is the brain's coping mechanism. It's called an escape fantasy. It's like a lot of doctors have this idea when we see either people who are doing, our gardening, or we go to Starbucks, we're like, I just want to work at Starbucks.
Oh, I still have an escapist fantasy, don't you?
Yes, we all do.
There's always a grass is greener. I now watch endless YouTube videos on homesteading Like, I think a small farm will bring me peace.
Oh, it would definitely be good.
And canning my own vegetables. I don't know what's happening. Like, and then
you would be covered in mud and have worms, and you'd hate that too. This is the human experience.
Every woman entrepreneur I know has some type of escapist fantasy, making jewelry in Mexico, like, so. Yeah.
Ours are unique,
but I bet a doctor's is very clear, like what their escapist fantasy is.
Yeah. And they often become intrusive. So recently with my, as my business was growing and the complexity, as you know, of my admin team in the back end was growing, I sort of developed this fantasy that I was going to sail off in Puerto Rico in a boat and just throw my laptop off of the balcony. And I was in Master Coach training, and Corinne Crabtree, who is a beautiful, successful coach and motivates people all around the world, was like, Sunny, you're just going to be miserable on that boat complaining about the waves and the weather. So you might as well stay what you're doing and keep doing what you're doing. And so anyway, this comes back to people come into our program, I think often, not always, often with, I don't know if I can stay in medicine anymore. And what we find, interestingly, our program, our initial program is 8 weeks long, is that a lot of times there's actually a lot I really like about it. I just had to learn. I don't have to say yes to all the demands. I don't have to do what they say. I don't have to do it their way. And I can do this my way.
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of people, it's very common that my people are thinking of leaving, come in, and they're like, I actually like a lot about my life. I was just suffering so bad I couldn't see the things that I like.
So, yeah.
And then there's people who are like, I'm going to leave this institution and do it on my terms. And some people will choose to have their own practice, or they'll choose to scale their own practice, or they'll choose to, oftentimes people too will, instead of being 1.0 FTE, which is like, 60, 80 hours for us, they'll decide to take like a certain day off and decide it's okay for me to take Friday off. Mm-hmm. And then they'll often find ways that they can buy back and even exponentially increase not only their finances, but their impact in the world, whether it's they're going to, on Fridays, they invest in real estate so they can have Fridays off, or we start to see ourselves as non all or none. Like, I'm a clinician or not, I'm a full-time doctor or not. It's like, oh, I'm a clinician and an expert and a consultant and a real estate investor. And I'm multifaceted. I'm not defined by my MD alone. And so I have certainly, and I think that that's part of why that sort of EWP is what my program is called, Empowering Women Physicians. And people have said it stands for examples of what is possible, because there's so many ways that all of us are strong women physicians, multifaceted, beautiful, unique, and there's no wrong way to do it.
I love that.
Mm-hmm. And you cultivate a room like that too, right? I mean, there's so many beautiful ways of the women in your room are showing up and changing the world. And that's one reason I really love being in your space, is because there's so many ways that you can be authentically, beautifully you and impact people. And there is no wrong way.
Yeah. There's no one way, like,
right. But we're told there is.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
We're told there is. No, you definitely,
it is true.
Even if at my university, even though I worked way outside the norm, right? Because I worked in the basement of a church for 20 something years running the free clinic. But even so, I'd like every single physician, there's like, this is the way. And people just take it for granted. Every 15 minutes, you should see a patient. Definitely. That's definitely how healthcare is provided in 2022. And like the most advanced society on the planet, medically, technologically, that's the best we have to offer.
Yeah.
Every 15 minutes.
Yeah.
What kind of crazy town is this?
This was the great thing about the last 2 years, is like every industry, every category was questioned. Suddenly like, well, is this the best way? Maybe there's a better way. Stuff came to the surface that needed attention. And so everything that was out of line, in so many areas was amplified and aggravated. And so finally, I think it woke a lot of people up. I mean, a lot of people weren't even aware of how hard the medical industry, was on its doctors until the last few years, and hearing things and seeing things and being like, why is this woman's telling a story of how she just worked 3 days with no sleep? Like, how is this possible? It brought to attention so much for us. And then in corporate, even, people, I'm hearing some parallels between the journey of your doctors and you, and even with people being in the same type of industry in corporate for so long. And then suddenly, realizing, I'm a whole person. There's other things I could do. And I could, have more of a life along with this and now work at home part-time or whatever it is. There's just so much opportunity right now. And something I want to honor you for in that, we didn't have time to get into it today before we wrap up, but I just want to say, for someone who came out of such a linear trajectory, now at such a place where I've witnessed you honor your own rhythms, honor what you're feeling, honor what your clients need at the time versus being locked into a formula and a structure. You go with the flow more than any trained physician I've ever met. Yeah. And there's something there. And I'm curious, was that there before? Was that unlocked at a later stage? Or was that kind of always you yearning to come out, that part of you?
I mean, it's a good question because I'm sure we could ask you the same question too, right? And we can find evidence. I'm fascinated with the human brain right now. When I first started doing this type of work, I really was like, should I become a psychiatrist? Should I do a fellowship in psychoanalytics? But I found I just like doing it my way and learning on all the different ways that I can learn about it. But the thing is, if you look back, we all have confirmation bias in our brain. So we can look back and find the evidence that it was always there and we were always this way. We can always find that. And so I, of course, have that same bias that I can be like, well, I was always kind of outside the box, wasn't I? As I said, I got married at 18 and I got through college in 3 years and I was on a TV show and giving away money to homeless people. And and then I spent 20 something years caring for people in the basement of a church in a literal toddler chair. These chairs are made for 2- and 3-year-olds. And I sat in them for 20 years, providing high quality healthcare and submitting the outcomes to the top medical journals to show that you could. And so I always was a little outside, I was always me, and I was always able to fit in enough that, you can speak to the people. You're not completely outside. And so now I think it's very similar. We look for who we were, how we became who we are. Like, even interestingly, the fact that I had been through creating a couple of movements, or being a part of creating a couple of movements. One was free clinics. Almost every medical school in the country now has one. And, so I was a part of that movement. And then there's something that I was an advisor in something called learning communities in medical school. And so they started very small number of schools. And now almost every medical school has them. And now I think physician coaching is also a similar movement. It's like every single physician deserves a coach. And I will never stop saying that. If a baseball player gets one, why not the people with the health of society in their hands? And so I think I've always been a little bit on the outside and a little willing to be different and creative and, show up late. I was voted. Like, it's so funny. I was thinking about this weekend, is that in the end of second year of medical school, they sometimes give awards. And I was voted 2 things that are exactly who I am today. One was most late, most tardy, because I would not show up unless I had to at the very last minute. And I was also given an award that was humanitarian contribution to the medical school community, which was an award they made up for me.
I bet you cried.
Yes. And the thing is, it's so who I am. It's like, I'm going to be a little rogue, a little weird, a little late.
I love how those go together.
Yeah, but I'm going to lead with my heart. And that's what matters.
Yeah.
I lead with my heart in every space I'm in. And that is what matters. And passion, emotions are contagious. Again, this is, neuroscience. These are called mirror neurons. Emotions are contagious. If you have passion and you have belief, other people start to feel passion and belief about those things that you're passionate about. And you can create many more changes than you could ever think you could in the world, especially if you're willing to do it together.
Sunny, before I ask my last question, tell everyone where they can learn more about EWP and follow you.
Yeah, they can go to empoweringwomenphysicians.com. We have something there that talks about, and I made it when I very, very first started doing this. It's like everything I knew about coaching that I thought women physicians could use at that time. And in fact, anyone could use it. So they can obtain that. They can, get on a wait list for one of our programs. I have a Facebook group that is only for women physicians. So To the listeners, don't even try and sneak in if you're not a woman physician. You are not welcome inside of that group. However, the places that everyone can go are the podcast as well. So Empowering Women Physicians podcast and the website. And I will always be saying things that apply to all humans. Nothing I say there is only applicable to physicians. So I have found that a lot of people's physicians' spouses or just people that I've met are like, oh, this really speaks to me and the human condition and how I'm constraining myself, much like this conversation was, right? This conversation doesn't apply just to physicians. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's where they can find us. Anybody can go to the podcast. Anybody can go to the website. You must be an MD or DO to come into our Facebook group.
Got it. Okay. 3 great pieces of advice to leave everyone with today.
I want to ask you. I'll answer first. One, I would say, is allow yourself to dream. When I started this journey, I gave myself 1 word per year for the last few years. And the first one was just possibilities. That was it. Just possibilities. Because your brain cannot argue that something is possible, right? Like maybe, just maybe it's possible that. Open with that phrase, maybe, just maybe it's possible I could go to the moon one day. Like there's no way your brain can argue against those things. So dream in possibilities. That would be step 1. Allow yourself to play in that magical playground like the younger version, the childlike version of you would do. Just play and dream in possibilities. And then I would say if we're doing 3, that's number 1. Number 2 is to believe that maybe, just maybe, that is possible for you. So believe. And then number 3 would be take action.
I love that. Sunny, this was so good. I feel like we could have part 2 and 3 and dive in deeper, but you're just an extraordinary human being. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart. It's been such a pleasure getting to know you and just being privy to what goes on behind the scenes and how you've made decisions in your life and your business and how, such a high priority on the people that you serve and help. I know it's been inspirational to everyone in the trust and just everyone who is around you. It's incredibly inspiring. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you for bringing me into your world. It has been beautiful to get to know the women that I've gotten to know through your space. I'm forever grateful.
We hope to see you soon.
See you soon.
Okay. Bye. Thank you for joining me for this episode of Glambition Radio. If you enjoyed the show, make sure you subscribe so you automatically get my new shows every week. Also, I'd love if you left us a review so more women like you can discover us. We're on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, Pandora, and other major platforms. And I'd love to hear from you personally. Come join the conversation on social. Instagram is my happy place lately, and that's Allie Brown Official, but you can find links to my other platforms at alliebrown.com. Glambition Radio is the elevated conversation for women leaders, and I'm honored you tuned in.